Daya Purnameva Vishishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Good. Welcome back. We'll continue our study of this Isha Upanishad. We left off last week in the middle of the fourth verse. So let us return to the fourth verse. Let's get that up on this. I remind you, of course, that if you want your own copy of this, you can go to our website and print out your own copy. Good. Repeat after me, please, and we'll recite it with the swaras that are part of the original text. Anehe charekam, anehe chare, manaso javiyo, manaso javi, naina deva, naina ahapnuvan purvamarshata, ahapnuvan purvamarshata, tadhavato nyan, tadhavato nyan, atyeheti tishtata, atyeheti tishtata, tasmin napo, mahatarishvaha dadhati, mahatarishvaha dadhati. Very good. And to pick up the thread, we'll see the first part of this verse, and then we'll proceed. This is talking about Atma Sarupa, your true nature, from two different perspectives. And it sounds very paradoxical or very mystical. And we'll talk about these words, paradox and mystical, in just a moment. Let me find it in this text. Anejata ekam, ekam, that one. That one is manasaha javiyaha. We saw this already, so just go quickly. It is faster than the mind, but it is anejata, unmoving. That one is faster than the mind, yet unmoving. Na enat devaha apnuvan purvamarshata. That one, even the devas here means sense organs. Your sense organs cannot observe or obtain, apnuvan. Your senses cannot observe or obtain that one. Why? Purvam arshata. It came first. Now we saw this in the prior class. Let's just remember what we're talking about here. We're talking about, in this particular case, since we're talking about mind, we're talking about your true nature with regard to the mind, which means we're talking about consciousness, chaitanya, chit. You are that consciousness. And before we proceed, this is where we must stop, full stop, and make sure that we're all on the same page, so to speak. When we're talking about consciousness, we are not talking about a concept. We're talking about you. The one hearing these words, the one who knows what's happening in your mind right now. So when we use words like consciousness, chit, chaitanya, please don't allow it to be a concept. It's you. You, the conscious being. Now, that you, the conscious being, consciousness, chit, or chaitanya, is described in that first line in two very different ways. First it says, manasaha javiyaha, faster than the mind. And then it says, anejata, without moving. And on the surface it looks paradoxical. Or in our satsang, someone brought up the word mystical. Mystical means that which can't be understood. If Vedantic teachings are mystical, what are we trying to do here? Honestly, mystical means that which can't be understood, that which can't be conveyed to another person. As a young man, I love that word mystical. Oh, it sounded so profound and wonderful, until I came to understand what it really means. That which you can't understand, that which cannot be conveyed from teacher to student, is mystical. So Vedanta and these teachings cannot be mystical in that sense. Profound, absolutely. Transformative, without doubt. But if you want to use the word mystical in the typical sense, we cannot say mystical, nor can we say paradoxical. We discussed in the last class, Vedanta teaches us. Paradox confuses us. Paradox means two things that don't fit together at all. This is not a paradox, it's meant to be understood. And you remember how we explained it. Two different perspectives on the same thing. Here we're talking about consciousness. Let's try this. Consciousness with an upadhi, a so-called conditioning adjunct. We've used that word several times now. Consciousness with a particular upadhi. What kind of upadhi? Your thoughts. Consciousness with a thought moves. How fast do your thoughts move? Pretty fast. Like we joked in our last class, your mind can leap from Somerset, New Jersey to Mumbai or Delhi or any place. How long does it take you to get there? A fraction of a second. That's how quick your mind moves. This is consciousness with the upadhi of a thought. But consciousness in and of itself, consciousness without reference to the thought, is identical with the ground of reality. Satyam Jnanam Anantam Brahma, the reality because of which everything exists, which means consciousness is already in Mumbai and Delhi and everywhere else, which means it's already everywhere, pervading the universe as the underlying substratum because of which everything exists. And as such, it is unmoving. We saw that in the last class. I'd like to add the commentators, especially Sri Shankaracharya, uses some very specific terms to describe these two perspectives. And I didn't introduce that in the last class. I'd like to do so tonight. The two perspectives we're talking about are with respect to an upadhi and without respect to an upadhi. So consciousness with a thought, with an upadhi, is that which moves very fast. With an upadhi in Sanskrit is this word. And I'll stay with Roman letters so no one will have a problem. It comes from sa upadhi. Sa is a short form of saha, meaning with. So that which is upadika saha, with an upadhi, and then it turns into an adjective in this way. Sopadhika means with an upadhi. That which is without upadhi, which means a reference to the very essence of the thing, we use the term, and that's a little easier to make out, nir meaning without. Nirupadhika is without reference to an upadhi. This kind of terminology would be used in scholarly commentaries all the time. You may not be reading those scholarly commentaries, but these terms are very important. They're very descriptive. Even the word upadhi doesn't lend itself to any kind of translation, so it's nice if we can use these terms in this class. So we could say, when we consider Satchidananda Atma, or just say consciousness, when we consider it from a sopadhika standpoint, we can say it's faster than the mind, faster than anything. But then when we say nirupadhika, in its essential nature, we have to say that it is utterly unmoving. So this describes under two perspectives we saw in the last class. And, it's the wrong book. And anything else? Let's see. All right, so we'll proceed then to the second half. Tad dhavatāha anyan atyeti tishtata. Same, almost the same idea is conveyed here. It atyeti, you see in the middle? Atyeti, it goes beyond. It goes beyond anyan, other things. Other things which are dhavatāha, moving, running. It goes faster than any other moving object. What was it, some comic book? Faster than a speeding bullet. So faster than any speeding thing, atyeti, that which transcends, that which goes beyond any movement, yet it is tishtata, unmoving. Same idea as the first line. Exactly the same idea. In spite of it being tishtata, unmoving, stable, fixed, stationary, in spite of that, it atyeti, goes faster than dhavatāha anyan, than any other moving thing. So this is the same two perspectives. With regard to upadhis, this consciousness is present in every moving thing, and it's whatever is the fastest moving thing, consciousness is present in that fastest moving thing. If you can find a faster moving thing, consciousness is present in that. So we could say then that consciousness is faster than the fast. That's with regard to the sopadhika standpoint. But with regard to the nirupadhika standpoint, consciousness in and of itself, tishtata, it is stationary, unmoving. Tasmin. This last line, by the way, is very cryptic. Without a commentary, it won't make any sense. Tasmin. Here it means that being so. Tasmin is really the locative pronoun, in that. But in this case, it means that being so. Consciousness existing in this manner. Since consciousness exists as, in fact, Shankara says some very profound things. His commentary on this text is wonderful, I should say. Yeah. Nitya Chaitanya Atma Sarupe. That which exists as Atma Sarupe, as the underlying existence, the fundamental existence, which is Nitya Chaitanya, eternal consciousness, better translated, unchanging consciousness. So that unchanging consciousness, which is the essence of whatever the object is, it is sarva aspada bhuta. It exists as the aspada, as the reality because of which sarva, everything else, exists. These are among the most profound teachings of Vedanta. The reality because of which everything exists is not different from the consciousness because of which you know what's happening right now. That, in brief, is the meaning of Tattvamasi. The consciousness by which you know what's happening right now. You call it your consciousness, I call it my consciousness, but in fact, it's not your consciousness or my consciousness, it is the one consciousness. Eka, the word was used before. And that Eka Chaitanya, Nitya Chaitanya, Sri Shankara says here, that unchanging consciousness is sarvaspada bhuta. It is the fundamental reality, the substratum, because of which everything exists. Tasmin, since consciousness exists as that underlying reality because of which everything exists, therefore, matarishva, and it's an obscure word, it literally means vayu, wind. but it has a more subtle meaning here. Just give you the simple meaning. Tasmin, since consciousness exists as the underlying reality because of which everything exists, therefore, matari shwa, the wind, vayu, dadhati, supports, sustains, apaha. Apaha means waters. What is it? Because consciousness exists, therefore the wind sustains the waters. Rishi Vakya, poetry. These are the poetic expressions of the ancient rishis. If you want something very simple and dried and layout, you can find Sri Shankara's text, Tattva Bodha. It reads like a computer manual. If you'd rather have that kind of text, read Tattva Bodha. But if you want to try to penetrate this wonderful poetic vision of the ancient rishis, that's what we're attempting to do in this class. So Matarishwa literally means vayu or the wind, but it's really referring to the prana or energy because of which living things are alive. The prana which imparts life. So take Matarishwa, literally means wind, but here we'll understand it more deeply, and according to Shankara's commentary, as the prana or life force, because of which everything lives. And the word apaha, waters, oddly enough, Sri Shankara says, what do you mean by apaha? He says, apaha karmani praninam. What? The actions of all living beings. Waters means the actions of all living beings. Don't even ask me how Shankara gets that interpretation, except it makes perfect sense if you put it in context. Tasmin, because of consciousness, therefore, prana, dadhati, supports and sustains the actions of all living beings. Makes perfect sense. Because of the existence of consciousness as the underlying reality because of which you and I exist, the underlying reality because of which prana exists, therefore prana enlivens our bodies and our minds, allowing us to function as living beings. So here, matarishwa, take it as prana, life force, dadhati, supports and sustains, apaha, all activities of living beings. It's obscure, but then this is how the rishis expressed themselves. The I don't know. The key word here is really tasmin. It's the existence of that underlying reality because of which anything at all can exist. I gave the pot as an example. I get my prop back. So we had rather a long discussion about this pot in a prior class. Suppose we can have a pot made of different materials, a pot made of clay, a pot made of wood, a pot made of metal, a pot made of whatever, glass, I suppose. How about a pot made of nothing? A pot without any content. A pot without any underlying reality. Non-existent. Without that underlying reality, without the clay, pot has no existence whatsoever. Without Atma, you and I have no existence whatsoever. Not just you and I, but the entire universe and everything therein. Atma is Shankara's word, sarvaspada, the underlying reality because of which everything exists. Now, this is to warm us up for the next verses. This is warm-up, by the way. Actually, one more verse, I think, continues in the... where am I here? Yeah. One more verse of warm-up. Then we get into the... This text is just getting going. Wait till it really gets going. The next verse is much in the same vein, describing that underlying reality consciousness from these two perspectives, sopadika and nirupadika. So let us move ahead to verse 5. Tadehe jati tannae jati, tadehe jati tannae jati, taddure tadvahantike, taddure tadvahantike, tadhantarasya sarvasya, tadhantarasya sarvasya, taru sarvasyasya bahyataha, taru sarvasyasya bahyataha. Very similar to the prior verse. Tad ejati, that one moves. Tan na ejati, that one doesn't move. Can you imagine reading this text without any background? That one moves. No, it doesn't. Is it mystical? Without any background. Ooh, how mystical. How paradoxical. Is it? Tad ejati, tan na ejati. Hey, that makes perfect sense. With regard to the upadhi, it moves. With regard to its own nature, it is utterly unmoving. We could say, with regard to the pot, it's subject to change. I could break the pot. But with regard to the clay, it's utterly unchanging. These are the two perspectives. With reference to the pot, clay is sopadika. With reference to the clay itself, clay is nirupadika. These are our two perspectives. All right. So that comes across very nicely here. Tad ejati, that one moves. Tan na ejati, that one doesn't move. Tad dure, that one is far away. Tad u, you have to break these words apart very carefully. Tad u antike. It becomes tad vantike. Tad dure, that one is far away. Tad antike, that one is inside. Inside means it can't be any closer to you. That one is far away. That one is close. Can't be if it's inside of you, it can't be close. So that one is far away. Is this one. Far away means it in fact, there's a parallel between these two words and some words often used in Western philosophy. Let me make this. Nirupadika means with reference to that absolute reality, the thing in and of itself, that underlying substratum which is beyond name and form. The underlying substratum which is beyond name and form. Beyond name and form, in Western philosophy, they'll use a word transcendent. And the word transcendent is not a translation of nirupadika. You know what nirupadika means. But it's a parallel concept. That which is nirupadika is indeed transcendent. That is, when you're talking about the underlying reality which is without name or form, that's exactly what Western philosophers mean by transcending. To transcend means to go beyond worldly experience, worldly things, to go beyond name and form. So that which is nirupadika is truly transcendent. The other word, many of you know this, the other word used by philosophers, the counterpoint to transcendent, opposite, not the opposite, but the counterposing principle, I don't know what word they would use, is immanent. These are words that Western philosophers often use to talk about God. God is out there in the heavens, beyond the world, beyond that which is beyond thought, beyond comprehension is transcendent. That which is immediately present here and now is immanent. So in a theological conversation, they'll say God's presence here is immanent. God's presence in heaven, this is Western theology. God's presence in heaven is transcendent. God's presence here is immanent. With regard to our pot, we can say that conceptually speaking, clay in and of itself is transcendent. It's transcendent because if this pot ceased to exist, if we ground it into dust, that clay would remain unchanged. In some sense, clay transcends the pot. In fact, transcends in many ways. Outside of the pot, there's more clay. In some riverbed in India, there's more clay from which this clay was taken. So clay truly goes beyond the pot. Clay transcends the pot, and clay, as we said, in and of itself, nirupadika. But sopadika standpoint, with regard to the pot, we can certainly say clay is in the pot. That's exactly what immanent means. Innately present. The closest of the close. And that's what, so here this line says both. Tad dure, that one is far away. That one is transcendent. And tad u antike. That one is immediately present. That one is antike, within. Now, Shankara makes a very interesting observation here. Again, these can't simultaneously be true. If we don't want to turn this into a paradox, we want to resolve the paradox. So Shankara takes an interesting perspective on this. Suppose something is immediately present but unrecognized. The example I've given before is, if I've lost my glasses, they could just as well be on Mars. You know, how far away are my glasses? If I don't know where they are, they could be anywhere. They could be as far away as Mars. I know that's not realistic, but you get the point. The distance is due to non-recognition. And this is very typically Shankara's standpoint. And he uses some nice language here. He says, Tadure varshakoti shataihi api avidusham aprapyatvat. He says, for avidusham, for people who don't recognize it, for people who are yet ignorant, it is aprapya, it is unobtainable, even varsha koti shataihi, even if you strive for it for millions of years, even striving for it for millions of years, it is aprapya, unobtainable, avidusham, for those who are ignorant. So, if I start looking all over the ashram for my glasses, how long will I have to look? Varsha shatakoti. Shatakoti, 100 crore years. A crore is what? Is 10 million? So 1 billion. 1 billion years. Shatakoti. If I'm ignorant. And the other side, though, is if I'm vidusham, Sri Shankara says, vidusham, atmatvat, he says, samipe, atyantam. It is recognized, vidusham, for those who recognize the truth. It is samipe, near. How near? Atyantam, samipe. As near as possible. What is the distance between me and my glasses? There's really no distance. But I could spend 1 billion years, according to Shankara, looking for my glasses. Or with knowledge, I could recognize that the glasses have been here all the time. This is the irony of spiritual life. I'll say, in spiritual life, there's nothing truly mystical, if it's understood properly. There's nothing paradoxical, if it's understood something. But there's a whole lot of irony in spiritual life. The irony is that which you seek is yourself. To use my guru's words, you already have what you want to possess. You already are what you want to become. But if you are avirusha, if you don't recognize it, you'll search for 1 billion years, in spite of it being already obtained. On the other hand, with knowledge, with Vedantic knowledge, with the spiritual knowledge, you come to recognize that that your true nature is already Satchidananda Atma. Just like recognizing that I've always had my glasses, they've never been away from me. In the same way, the recognition is, you have always been Satchidananda Atma. Tadure tad antike. And the last line. Tad antarasya sarvasya. Tat, that is sarvasya antarasya. That is that is within all. Sarvasya, for everything, that is tad antara, that is within. For everything that is within, tad sarvasya asya, and for all that, it is bahyataha, outside. The Sanskrit is actually quite simple. Sarvasya, for everything, antarasya, tat antarasya. Sarvasya, for everything, tat antarasya, that is within. Asya sarvasya, and for everything, tat bahyataha, it is outside. For everything it is inside, for everything it is outside. Mystical, paradoxical. For everything it is bahyataha, outside, nirupadhika. Consciousness is beyond name and form, transcendent. But for everything, it is antara, it is within. Sopadhika, immanent, immediately present. These are two different perspectives. Please note, they cannot be combined. These are two perspectives, different perspectives on the same thing. This challenges us. Just a quick comment here before we move on to the next topic. We don't like things that are confusing. Tell me which it is. Is it immanent or is it transcendent? Which one is it? And Swamiji says, yes. That can be very, is it inside or outside? Yes. Is it close or is it far away? Yes. But sometimes reality is like that. I'll give a favorite example from the world of science. And many of you from your younger days will remember a science class in which you were taught about light. And you were taught in that science class many years ago that light is a particle called a photon. You were also taught that light is an electromagnetic wave. Electromagnetic waves and particles, photons, are different things. You may have had, if you weren't in that class, I'm giving you the catch-up session right now. If you missed that class, you're okay. I'll take care of it right now. In that class, your professor very, very elegantly explained that in some situations light behaves as a particle, in other situations light behaves as an electromagnetic wave. Therefore, if you were to have asked your professor, well, tell me, which one is it? Is light a wave or is light a particle? Your professor would have said, yes. That is the reality of light. It has a dual nature, is a word that is the expression that physicists use. In order to describe light completely, you have to describe it from both standpoints. But please note that these two standpoints are mutually incompatible. Light either behaves as a wave or it behaves as a particle, a photon. It cannot behave as both simultaneously. That's the nature of light. Now here, we're not talking about physics, we're talking about something much more philosophical, but the same principles apply here. When we're trying to understand a fundamental reality, consciousness, sarvaspada, the basis because of which everything exists, the fundamental reality, the substratum of everything. So when we're talking about that substratum, we have two mutually incompatible perspectives. One is the sopadika perspective, that underlying reality in a given upadhi, the clay in the form of a pot, sopadika. Then we have the other perspective, clay in and of itself, the underlying reality, satyam jnanam anantam brahma, in and of itself, nirupadika. These are two utterly different and incompatible perspectives. But just as you need to have both perspectives on light, particle and wave, in order to understand light, in the same way, to understand fundamental reality, Brahman or Atma, which end up being the same, in order to understand, we have to understand both of these perspectives. Okay. Now, things heat up, as it were, as we move on to the next verse. So we've had two verses establishing these two perspectives on consciousness, Satchidananda Atma, as the underlying reality. Suppose you really get it. What was the vision of the rishis? The rishis for whom these expressions were not philosophical. The rishis were not philosophers. This is just a little tangent, but I think an important one. The rishis were not philosophers. Philosopher is a little bit like a mathematician. They're in love with ideas, in love with knowledge, in love with concepts. The very word philosophy, as most of you know, means love of knowledge. Phileo is the Greek word for love. Sophia was the goddess of knowledge. So a philosopher is one who loves knowledge and ideas and concepts. The rishis were not philosophers. The root from which the word rishi is derived literally means to see, which is one reason in quaint Indian English, rishi is often translated seer, right? Nice. It sounds a little quaint to our modern ears. It's actually very meaningful. Sage is a good translation, but seer suggests something more. Those who could see what others could not. Those who could discover what others could not. Sage also works, wise ones, those who could understand what others could not. So these rishis were not philosophers. They weren't interested in abstractions, concepts, and ideas. They had a vision of reality. Vision in the sense of an understanding or worldview. And what's going to be conveyed in the next two verses is the worldview of those rishis, the vision of the rishis, and it's conveyed in a very profound way. Let's chant it properly. Yastu sarvahani bhutanya yastu sarvahani bhutanya atmanyevanupashyati atmanyevanupashyati sarvabhuteshu chatmanam sarvabhuteshu chatmanam tato navijugupsate tato navijugupsate. This is wonderful. Yaha, those, one who, two, but indeed. Yaha, one who anupashyati, sees, literally. One who sees, actually, anupashyati means to see. Anupashyati would better be translated as recognize. That which follows seeing. To see pashyati, that which follows seeing. Anupashyati. So you can see something without understanding it. You can see something without recognizing it. But the rishis not only saw this reality, they recognized this reality, they understood this reality. Anupashyati. Yaha, one who, anupashyati, recognizes, we'll translate it, recognizes sarvani bhutani, all creatures, or all existence, everything that exists, sarvani, all, bhutani, all individual things that exist. Yaha anupashyati, one who recognizes all of that, atmani eva. Atmani, in oneself, eva, alone. One who recognizes all that exists within Atma, within one's true self. We'll get the verse and then we'll get the deeper meaning. And, in the second line, sarva bhuteshu cha atmanam cha, and anupashyati, recognizes atmanam, the true self, sarva bhuteshu, in all that exists. It's actually not very complicated. One who recognizes the presence of Atma in all things, that's the second part, and one who recognizes that all that exists has Atma as its underlying reality. Now, let's make sure we can understand this. These are the crowning teachings of Vedanta. This is not Vedanta 101. Upanishads are not Vedanta 101. Upanishads are the source of all Vedantic teachings. So here we're getting the origin of teachings, including the origin of the Mahavakyas, because the essence of the Mahavakyas are in this expression. To recognize, now the word Atma here, Shankara's expression before, sarva aspada. The word Atma, by the way, literally means, the simple direct meaning of it is self. In every meaning of the word self. Just as we use the English word self in many ways, self, the word Atma can be used, but it can be used in some ways that we wouldn't use it in English. We could say that the self of the pot is clay. Follow that? The self of the pot, the Atma of the pot, the essence of the pot, the essential nature of the pot. Here Atma is being used in that term. The essential nature of the pot is clay. So, with that in mind, now this verse will make more sense. We're using Atma in that sense, that fundamental nature, sarvasvata, the fundamental reality because of which everything exists. One who recognizes, let's use some simple American English. One who recognizes that universal reality is present in all of these forms, one who recognizes that that same universal reality is present in myself as my Atma, the reality of me, the reality because of which you exist, and the reality because of which I exist, are one and the same reality. And to go beyond this, the one who recognizes that the only thing that exists is this underlying reality. That point, a little tricky. Am I holding two things in my hand, pot and clay? Really speaking, there's only clay. Pot is just a form. Clay is the underlying reality. Imagine what the ancient rishis saw. We're talking about their vision of reality, their worldview. When they looked around and saw everything, what did they see? That's what's being expressed in this verse. Sarvani bhutani, all that exists is Atmani, non-separate from its underlying substratum, Atma. Which means to look around a room and recognize that every individual person and every object in this room is as non-separate from its underlying substratum as this pot is non-separate from clay. You don't have a problem with that one, right? Pot is non-separate from clay? No problem. How about everything in this room is non-separate from the fundamental reality because of which everything exists? Hey, that's not so difficult to grasp. That's the first part. And the second part, sarva bhuteshu cha atmanam. That fundamental reality is present, just as clay is present in this pot. That fundamental reality is present in you and me and everything. This is one of the loftiest teachings of Vedanta. In fact, I was talking to another student today. In 11 years of teaching here, I haven't yet taught this particular topic. This particular topic has a very important name. This topic you won't find, I think, outside of the big ashrams in Rishikesh hardware. You won't find this topic taught because it's, frankly speaking, that lofty. Let me try to explain it a little bit. Sarvatma bhava. Bhava here means the state or condition. The state or condition of being the Atma of Sarva. The state or condition of being, the state or condition of being the underlying reality of everything. Now, again, the rishis were not philosophers. This complicated term describes their experience. Imagine, let's see how to describe their experience. This goes back to an early topic we discussed about Vivartavada, that everything that exists is a projection. The underlying reality of the projection is this reality we're calling Atma in these verses. You can call it Atma, you can call it Brahman, you can call it Satchidananda, you can call it Satyam Jnanam Anantam, just different expressions for the same truth, the same reality. So this expression, the condition of being the Atma, or essence of all, is not a complicated technical expression that we use in Vedanta, although it is. a complicated technical expression. It's actually meant to describe how the ancient rishis saw the world, and they saw the world in terms of Vivartavada. They saw the world as projection based upon this underlying reality, and the best metaphor to describe that is one that we gave at the very beginning of these classes, where we said it's as though the world is a dream. Now, we said at that time that the world is not a dream, but dream is a good metaphor for understanding Vivartavada, this doctrine of projection. Vivartavada means a doctrine of projection. So in that doctrine of projection, to go back to the dream metaphor, when you dream, you project a dream world. You create a dream world out of consciousness. Consciousness is the underlying reality because of which your dream world exists. And when you dream, you create a world. The dream world that you create has consciousness as its substratum, and then has all the individual characters as the projection, as the jagat, so to speak, as the dream world. Now, to really explore this nicely, when you dream, you recognize that you're usually, not always, but quite often, we're characters in our own dreams, right? So when we're dreaming, it's usually not like I'm laying in bed and creating this world. That's usually not our experience. Excuse me. Usually our experience is being one of many dream characters. Now, in order to make this metaphor work, you have to understand what is a lucid dream. Have you ever heard that expression? You may even have had the experience of lucid dreaming, which means to dream and know you're dreaming. A lucid dream means to dream, but in the dream, you know it's a dream. You've probably had some, at least moments like that. Maybe sometimes when a dream is coming to an end, it's easy to have that. Excuse me. Imagine. This is fun. Imagine that you dreamt getting out of bed this morning. Imagine that this is your lucid dream. What we're doing right now is your lucid dream. You're dreaming right now. And you are a character in your dream right now, sitting in the lecture hall. I'm a character in this dream, going on and on about this particular topic. We're all characters in your dream. This is your lucid dream. You dreamt getting out of bed this morning. You dreamt going to work. You dreamt coming here in the evening. And now you're dreaming that you're sitting in this class. And because it's a lucid dream, you know you're dreaming. Now, what is your perspective as a lucid dreamer as you look around the world, look around the room, which is looking around your dream world? As you look around the room, you'll recognize that everything you see is a projection. Correct? This is your dream. You look around. Swami Tadatmananda is a projection. The room around us is a projection. All your fellow students, all projections. You also appreciate that the fundamental reality because of which dreams exist is consciousness. The dream is in consciousness. The dream is projected upon consciousness. And you recognize that one consciousness is a reality because of which Swamiji exists. That one consciousness is the reality because of which your fellow students exists. That one consciousness is a reality because of which you, the dream character, exists. All is a projection on this one consciousness. One consciousness appearing in all these many forms. You, having a lucid dream right now, could look around you and appreciate that there is one consciousness that has become manifest in everything and every form I see, what we've just described, is Sarvatma Bhava. The recognition of the Atma of Sarva, of all, the reality of all. And the condition is that the Atma of all is the Atma of me. The reality because of which I exist is the reality because of which you exist. There is that one Atma in all these forms, but to recognize it not in a philosophical way, but in a very immediate, experiential way. To recognize first that there is a fundamental reality because of which I exist, Satchidananda Atma, and that Satchidananda Atma because of which I exist is utterly the same as the Satchidananda Atma because of which you exist, and everything exists. To recognize the one Atma of all, that one underlying reality of all, that is Sarvatma Bhava. I'd like to share with you how Sri Shankara explains it. And he explains it just wonderfully. He says, Yata asya dehasya karya karana sanghatasya atma. Just as there is an atma, an underlying reality for this body. Karya karana sanghata is Shankara's language for this body. This body made of stula sharira, sukshma sharira, karana sharira. For this body, there is an underlying reality called Atma. Just as there is an underlying reality for this body and mind, this body-mind complex called Atma, and that Atma is aham. I am that Atma because of which this body-mind complex exists. This is the first part of his statement. Sarvatma Bhava requires two levels of understanding. First, an understanding of yourself. I am that Satchidananda Atma because of which this body-mind complex exists as a living being. Further, then he goes on, that Atma, in fact, he defines very carefully. He says that Atma is sarva pratyaya sakshi bhutaha. That Atma is the conscious observer of every mental event. All the activities in my mind are revealed by that one consciousness, by that Atma, because of which my body-mind exists. And that one is the Chetayata, the consciousness. That one is Kevalaha. There's only one consciousness. The knower of your thoughts is one or many in your own experience. One. Kevalaha. One only. Also, it is nirgunaha. These are heavy words. Your mind and body have many qualities, many characteristics, but the consciousness behind the mind, body, and all your thoughts is utterly free from any kinds of particular qualities or characteristics. It is nirgunaha. Anena, so this is the first step, understanding the Atma of you. Understanding your fundamental nature. Shankara says your fundamental nature as the reality because of which your body-mind exists, as the consciousness that reveals all of your thoughts, the consciousness which is one, unchanging, and without qualities or characteristics. Then the second part. Anena eva surupena, due to this very nature, Vyaktadin stavara antanam aham eva atma. Vyaktadinam. Actually, avyaktadinam stavarantanam. For everything that exists, whether it is Actually, I think it has to be Vyaktadinam. Not Avyaktadinam. Doesn't make sense. Vyaktadinam, Stavarantanam. Makes sense. For everything that is Vyakta. Vyakta literally means manifest. In Hindi, you use this word Vyakti all the time. It literally means someone who's manifest. Avyakta is a common philosophical term for unmanifest. Avyakta, unmanifest. Vyakta, manifest. Vyakti, you and me, as manifest beings. So here, Vyaktadinam, for all that exists, for all that has been manifest, Vyaktadinam, Stavarantanam, from living beings down to immovable objects, for any individual thing that exists, whether it is a living being or an inert object. Aham eva atma iti. I am the self because of which they exist. That's the second part. I'll put the two parts together here. Sarvatma bhava. The reality because of which I exist, the reality because of which my body and mind exist, the reality that I am, revealing my thoughts, revealing my emotions, revealing everything I pick up through my senses, that conscious reality, which is the essence of me, that same conscious reality is the essence, Atma here meaning essence. That same conscious reality is the essence of everything that exists, living beings down to clods of earth is a Sanskrit expression that's often used. Sarvatma bhava means to recognize, not conceptually, and I come back to this point again and again because this teaching is mostly understood by people in a very philosophical way. And I don't want to repeat myself, but the rishis weren't philosophers. This describes their experience. They didn't go around and say, oh, theoretically, there's one reality because of which everything exists. That's how a philosopher would think and talk. What the rishis saw is they recognized the reality because of which I exist is the reality because of which you exist. It's the same reality. Now, that sounds a little abstract. The Shankara's terms are less abstract. The aham, the I. Let's try this. The I, because of which I exist, is the same as the I, because of which you exist. How does that work? It comes a little closer. The Atma, because of which I exist, is the Atma, because of which you exist. The change here is now I is in the first person. It's not a theory, it's not a concept, it's you. This idea, this teaching, Sarvatma Bhava, this teaching that the reality, that my reality, the reality of me, is the same as the reality of you. This is not an abstract concept. This is the vision of the rishis, and this is the vision of anyone who can attain this Vedantic wisdom, this understanding, this Atma Vidya, this self-knowledge. The last line here, tataha, therefore, na vijigupsate, therefore, one does not hate. You're wondering, what is the connection with hate? Sarvatma bhava, therefore don't hate. Wait a minute. If you are non-separate from me, why would I hate you? It's very interesting. We never intentionally injure ourselves, right? Occasionally, unintentionally, we'll be walking along, we'll stumble and fall, or if, this is just a funny thing, you're eating and talking and you bite your tongue. we would we would never intentionally hurt ourselves. Why? It's me. Suppose you understood me to include you. Isn't that what Sarvatma Bhava is? Suppose me includes you, and you, and you, and you, and you, and you. This is a vision of ekatva, and that word comes in the next verse, which we'll see in our next class. A vision of oneness, a vision of unity. This is what's being developed in these verses. Sarvatma means the one reality because of which everything exists. But they're here again. That one reality is not an abstract concept. That one reality is you. And if you can get that, you have gotten the vision of the ancient rishis. This is Sarvatma Bhava. This is really one of the highest teachings. I can't even say one of. There's nothing beyond this. Actually, there is, but we won't go there tonight. There's something called Ajatavada, which is beyond this. We don't even want to talk about that. But conventionally speaking, this is of the highest order of teachings of Vedanta. We have one more verse that further expands upon this, and we'll see that when we meet next time. We'll conclude with our prayers. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinah Sarve Santu Niramayaha Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschid Dukkha Bhag Bhavet Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritangamaya Om Shanti 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 Om Tat Sat.